This is my radar case study of the December 15th, 2021 Derecho. Here's a brief summary of the synoptic setup behind this event. A strongly negatively tilted shortwave trough associated with a rapidly deepening low pressure and attendant very strong cold front were all rapidly ejecting off to the northeast through this region. Associated with that trough was an 80 to 120 knot 500 millibar jet streak that was rounding the trough base. The strongest segment of that derecho was located within the left exit region of the trough, and that is the segment that plowed through Nebraska and most of Iowa. 63 tornadoes hit Iowa within 24 hours, 21 of which were rated EF2 strength, which set a record for both categories. There were strong non-thunderstorm winds ahead of the line associated with warm air advection, which brought record high temperatures into the mid-70s and dew points into the low 60s, and behind the line associated with the cold air advection after the passage of the cold front, there were another area of 60 to 80 mile per hour winds moving through Iowa. I'll be focusing on one segment of this derecho, specifically the one that passed through Cass, Audubon, Guthrie, Greene, Boone, and Webster counties. It became a highly prolific tornado producer with 13 tornadoes from this segment rated EF2, 4 were rated EF1, 2 were rated EF0, and 1 was rated EFU due to the fact that it hit exclusively empty fields. There was a very lopsided damage distribution with these tornadoes as well due to very fast forward motions, mostly greater than 70 miles per hour to the northeast, and the storm motion favored the higher winds and more damage on the right side relative to motion with these tornadoes. And here we go with the beginning of the tornado sequence in Cass County. Several tornadoes were already produced east of Omaha, along with 80 to 100 mile per hour winds. And you can see just below the circled region, there is an embedded bowing structure taking shape. And just above that, in the circled region, you have a very tight updraft downdraft convergence zone with your circulation quickly taking shape southwest of Atlantic. This was also co-located with a bounded weak ecoregion on reflectivity, and your fast 80 mile per hour northeast storm motion helped this tornado quickly attain EF2 strength. Just a couple of scans later, your EF2 had already touched down and at this point was north of Atlantic. You can see that within the encircled region, pretty much just above the N in Atlantic, and you have a second circulation taking shape north of the T and I of Atlantic within that encircled region. This would go on to move into Audubon County. And at this point, you have a pronounced large-scale mesovortex with multiple embedded areas of rotation, and it appeared nearly supercellular at times, likely owing to the influence of that very strong rear inflow jet shaping this portion of the line. Now in this image, the segment of the storm has moved off into Audubon County. You have now two clear and distinct tornado vortex signatures visible on your base velocity. The more northern one is a continuation of that EF2 from Cass County, and the southern one is the brand new EF1 touching down on the border of Audubon and Cass counties. Your storm motions had slowed just a little bit down to 75 miles per hour northeast, and your strongly bowing segment south of that encircled region is also soon to become tornadic as the line shear orientation continues to improve. In this scan, you can see that the two tornadoes that were on the ground within Audubon County have cycled out and lifted, and you are beginning to see signs of new rotation near the Audubon-Guthrie County border. I have encircled that. You can see a couple little couplets trying to take shape, and rapid onset of tornadogenesis was going to occur within less than 5 minutes of this scan. And below that circled segment of the line, there are 60 to 90 mile per hour winds associated with the bowing structure to the south of the mesovortex. By the very next scan, you can see two velocity couplets forming in western Guthrie County. The more northern of the two couplets is your stronger EF2 tornado. The southern one becomes an EF1, and this is all taking place within this now embedded supercell structure, owing likely to the influence of the very strong rear inflow jet feeding into that bowing segment south of where this rotation has been encircled on the radar.
couple scans later, and you now have an EF1 and an EF2 ongoing within that encircled area. Your couplet that is more in the northwest part of Guthrie County is your EF2, and the one couplet just to the southeast of that is your EF1. So very close proximity to each other. And to the south of that encircled area, you can see that Boeing segment producing 70 to 80 to 90 mile per hour winds, and this is also soon to become tornadic itself. Just a few scans removed from the last slide, your EF2 has now moved into Greene County, and you now have a second EF2 that developed pretty much from the ghost of the circulation of the previous EF1 that is going to be moving into Greene County as well. And then within the next two scans, you have 4 tornadoes on the ground in Greene County simultaneously. There is one couplet visible just west of the J in Jefferson, another one to the south of the J within that first encircled region, and then between the warning overlaps in the second encircled region, you have 2 more EF2s going at the same time. And at this point, this is taking more of a bookend vortex look on base reflectivity. Here is where the town of Jefferson gets incredibly lucky. However, Grand Junction takes a direct hit. So with 4 EF2s on the ground, Jefferson gets missed by all of them, and I've got those all encircled there. Grand Junction gets slammed by this last encircled one. It's moving from southwest to northeast, cut right through the center of town. The rest of these tornadoes impacted mainly rural areas of Greene County, and these dominant mesovortices are firmly tethered to your very well-defined updraft, downdraft convergence zone. Now we move on to the Boone and Webster County tornado sequence. You have a continuation of that tornado that impacted Grand Junction going into the northwestern side of Boone County. That is the furthest south encircled velocity couplet. And another EF2 had just crossed over the Webster County line. The threat is clearly taking aim at Fort Dodge, which is where I was located to try to get some footage of these. And that large encircled area is showing your next tornadic zone associated with this line. You can see a couple little areas of rotation trying to take shape within that. Just a couple minutes later, and we now have 3 EF2s on the ground within Webster County, one directly to the west of Fort Dodge, one to the south of Fort Dodge, and then one in southeastern Webster County. All of your tornado potential on the line segment south of this big bookend vortex that is now developed is completely gone. It's all outflow dominant, and it went on to produce 50 and 60 mile per hour wind gusts for the remainder of its path. Just a couple minutes removed from the last scan that was on the last slide, that tornado that was well to the south of Fort Dodge cycled out and a vortex handoff occurred with a new couplet forming a little bit closer to Fort Dodge with another EF2. That would slide just to the east of Fort Dodge, impacting several homes, and I ended up driving through the damage path of those tornadoes maybe 10-15 minutes after they were down. Pretty sad to see. And then down in southeastern Webster County, within that other encircled area, you can see 2 other pretty well-defined tornado vortex signatures associated with 2 more EF2s. Fort Dodge itself did get impacted by some pretty strong winds with a measured gust of 73 miles per hour. And in between these 2 encircled areas, another EF0 would form and quickly move off to the northeast, not doing much damage. But this segment would continue to produce tornadoes all the way through Iowa, well into Wisconsin, several hours after dark. Here I have included a base reflectivity replay of this entire tornado sequence just because it's easier to demonstrate the influence that that strong rear inflow jet had on shaping this big bookend vortex that was responsible for some of the most prolific tornado production within this derecho. But even north of that, you can see other embedded circulations within this southeast to northwest orientated portion of the derecho. And those were also equally responsible for some devastating tornadoes as well. Here I have decided to include a normalized rotation replay of the sequence just so you can see how persistent and strong the rotation associated with that big bookend vortex that swept through Cass, Audubon, Guthrie, Greene, and Webster and Boone counties was. And it also demonstrates how quickly that rear inflow jet influenced the portion of the line south of that to become strongly outflow dominant as well.
And here I've decided to include some footage that I took. This video on the left, I was south of Fort Dodge, looking to the south and the southwest. And as it plays through, you'll notice some of the lightning is rather orangish. And I think that was due to the dust and smoke being fed into the back end of this derecho. Behind the cold front, there was very, very dry air and very high winds. We had a couple wildfires starting in Colorado and Kansas, as well as just an entire sweeping dust storm due to the high winds, and I think that was influencing some of the colors within this lightning. But one thing you'll notice, kind of in the center frame, there is a red flash that happens right there. I believe that was a power flash from either an ongoing tornado or the very high winds within this line. And then this video on the right is just some nice spider lightning culminating in a big cloud to ground strike off in the distance as I was driving back into Fort Dodge. A slide to give credit to the National Weather Service of Des Moines for the GIF on slide 2 showing the overview of the storms along with a time scale of measured wind gusts. And special thanks to the 7 weather forecast offices that had to coordinate during and after this event to put together these surveys.